My name is Elise Moran, age 31, licensed wilderness guide and documentarian based in Northern California. For the past 6 years, I've filmed solo survival expeditions for an online series focused on self-sufficiency, emergency preparedness, and the psychological effects of isolation. Each trip follows a strict structure: 3 days of travel into the wilderness, 4 days of living off the land, and a single night of return. My work is observational, unscripted, and methodical. I document everything: gear logs, navigation routes, resource locations, even my stress levels. It's a way to quantify fear, to measure how the mind shifts when stripped of convenience and company. The location I chose for this trip was a region called Granite Hollow, deep within the El Dorado National Forest. It's a granite basin carved by glaciers, its cliffs streaked with quartz veins and wild pines gripping the cracks. Few people go there. The trailhead is unmarked and no official route passes through. I'd found it through old USGS maps and a mention in a 1978 forestry survey that described an unnamed hollow between the east and south forks of the Rubicon River, noted for erratic compass readings. That caught my attention, not as a supernatural curiosity but as a survival challenge. Compasses behave strangely in magnetite-rich rock. I wanted to test how orientation could be maintained when standard navigation tools fail. I started before dawn, filming every step from the truck drop point down to the hollow. The air smelled like whetstone and sage. My pack was heavy with gear: 2 cameras, tripod, drone, sleeping roll, and a 7-inch field monitor strapped across my chest. The trail faded after a mile, replaced by granite shelves and fallen timber. As I climbed over the rocks, I spoke to the camera about topography, hydration intervals, and how to identify edible lichens. My tone was professional, but the forest was unusually still. No wind, no bird noise. When I stopped moving, I could hear the faint hiss of the camera microphone trying to find sound. By noon, I reached the lip of the basin. It opened like a crater, gray rock sloping inward, ringed by low pine ridges and a small stream threading through the middle. I set camp near a stand of cedar, close enough to the water to refill my filter, but far enough from the granite echo to keep audio clean. I placed a trail cam at the edge of camp, facing the creek. Another faced the ridge above. I always film from multiple angles so I can sync them later in post. The first few hours went as expected. I built a small fire pit, unpacked my cooking kit, recorded a segment about navigation using sun angles. Around 3 p.m., I noticed something odd on playback. One of the cameras, mounted near the cedar, had switched itself on about 20 minutes before I reached camp. I checked the file time, 11:47 a.m. The footage was short, just 30 seconds, and badly framed, angled toward the ridge, showing movement between the trees. A shadow, maybe. The lens autofocused several times as if tracking something. I assumed I'd brushed the power switch while setting it down. I deleted the clip. As daylight faded, I began the night prep portion of filming, gathering fuel, rigging a tarp shelter, preparing food. The forest darkened fast, the granite swallowing light until it felt like I was underwater. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath turned silver in the beam of my headlamp. I filmed a short entry for the end of day 1. No sign of wildlife activity, no tracks, no sound. Compass remains unreliable. Declination reads, I paused. The compass needle was spinning slowly, counterclockwise. Undefined, I said into the lens. But I know where I am. Granite Hollow. Coordinates logged. I shut off the camera, packed it beside my sleeping roll, and crawled under the tarp. I remember thinking how quiet it was, too quiet. Even the creek sounded muffled, like the flow was being absorbed by the stone. I fell asleep to the soft click of the cooling fire. When I woke, it was still night. My watch said 2:13 a.m. The fire had burned to embers, but there was light, white, diffuse, coming from somewhere behind me. I sat up fast, thinking it was the moon, but the beam was moving, jerky and mechanical. My field monitor was on, the screen glowing against the tarp. It was playing footage I hadn't shot. The file was labeled CAM0223 4-MP4. The angle showed my own camp filmed from the ridge. In the frame, I was visible, sleeping under the tarp, completely still. The camera panned slightly like someone holding it, breathing hard. The sound was faint but real, crunching gravel, slow exhale, the whisper of clothing. Then for 3 seconds a silhouette entered the edge of the frame. Tall, shoulders hunched forward. It stood near the cedar, half hidden, facing my camp. The lens lost focus, then the feed cut to black. I tore open my gear bag, heart pounding. Both cameras were accounted for, both off. Their batteries were at full charge. I checked the drone, still folded, propellers locked. My first thought was that someone had followed me in. Poachers maybe, or illegal campers, but Granite Hollow was miles off any known trail. And whoever they were, they'd managed to approach without a sound. I spent the rest of the night half awake, gripping my survival knife and listening for movement. The woods stayed silent. At dawn, I did a full perimeter check. The cedar grove looked untouched. No boot prints, no bent grass, no disturbed ash around the fire. The ground was so dry it held nothing. I powered both cameras and scanned through the SD cards. Only the one file, the one labeled 2314, was new. The time code matched the night exactly. But the metadata showed something stranger. The clip was recorded from Cams 03. I had only 2 cameras. I filmed my reaction. Part of my protocol is to document every irregularity. My voice shook a little on playback. I kept telling myself this was a technical glitch, maybe corrupted metadata. I made coffee, logged my coordinates again, and started a hike up the south ridge to reset the trail cam. Halfway there, the forest changed. The light dimmed, though the sky was clear. My headlamp flickered even though it wasn't on. I could feel the static in the air. The trees were wider spaced here, their roots clutching the granite like veins. I found the trail cam exactly where I'd left it, still mounted, still powered. But when I checked the screen, the last recorded motion event was stamped 4:22 a.m. That was nearly 2 hours after I'd already been awake. I pressed play. The video opened with the creek again, the water faintly glowing in the moonlight. Then, out of the lower corner, a figure crossed quickly, almost gliding. I replayed it 3 times, slowing it down each pass. The outline was human, but the proportions were wrong. The arms hung too long, and the head turned with a shuddering lag like a frame skip. I tried to laugh it off. The logical part of my brain, trained in years of field recording, told me it was a light anomaly, a reflection, maybe an insect close to the lens. Still, I packed up the camera and decided to hike toward the northern edge of the basin. My plan was to scout an alternate exit route, maybe film some terrain footage for B-roll, and decide later whether to cut the trip short. The ridge grew steeper, the granite slick with dew. Around 9 a.m., my radio crackled with static. I wasn't broadcasting. The voice that came through was faint, rhythmic, like someone repeating coordinates, but the numbers didn't make sense. I turned off the radio, then on again. Silence. When I reached the crest, the view opened wide. The hollow stretched below. My camp a small patch near the creek. I lifted my camera to record a panoramic shot, adjusting the focus ring. Through the viewfinder, I caught movement again near the camp. A figure standing beside the cedar, just visible between the branches. It was still almost deliberate, facing the spot where I'd slept. I lowered the camera. The clearing was empty. That was the first time I felt it. Not fear exactly, but the realization that Granite Hollow might not be as deserted as the maps claimed. The wind picked up around midday, thin and high, like air being pulled through the hollow. I tried to convince myself the cold crawling under my jacket was just fatigue. The ridge offered a full view of camp below. Tarp, gear pile, even the faint thread of smoke from my breakfast fire. Everything was right where I'd left it. No figure now. I stayed up there longer than I should have, scanning the basin with my binoculars. No movement, no sign of any other hiker. Still, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. When I lowered the lens, the silence pressed in so tight I could hear the pulse in my ears. By 1 p.m., I started back down the slope. My legs trembled with every step, not from exertion, but from the eerie stillness that followed me through the rocks. My camera recorded continuously. I didn't want gaps in case I caught something explainable later. I kept narrating into the mic, forcing professionalism into my voice. Returning to camp for midday review. Possible false positive on ridge observation. No signs of intrusion or wildlife disturbance. Halfway down, I heard the first sound that didn't belong. A click, soft but distinct, like metal snapping back into place. I froze, panning my camera across the trees below. The echo came again, closer this time. I knelt and watched through the viewfinder. Nothing. But when I replayed the footage seconds later, a flicker appeared at the edge of the frame. Movement between two cedars. The wind died. Everything else stopped with it. I made it back to camp without incident. My gear was undisturbed. The trail cam I'd left near the creek was still upright, but the indicator light was blinking red. Motion detected. I popped the SD card and slotted it into my field monitor. The most recent clip had recorded just 10 minutes earlier. It showed my empty camp, tarp swaying slightly in the breeze. Then, without transition, a shadow crossed the screen. The body shape was unmistakable. Human. The frame jittered as if the lens itself had trembled. Then static. I shut the monitor off and forced myself to breathe. No footprints again. Just smooth granite and crushed pine needles. My pulse was hammering so hard it made my vision pulse too. I had two options: leave immediately or keep documenting. And because I'm trained to rationalize, I convinced myself to stay. Maybe my equipment had been compromised by the magnetic interference in the rock. Maybe someone else really was out here, a lost hunter, a surveyor. People underestimate how often the forest mirrors your nerves. So I reset both cameras again, facing different angles of the camp. I made lunch, narrated as usual, tried to restore rhythm to the day. My voice on playback sounded thin and hollow. Around 3 p.m. the sun turned sharp and colorless like winter light, though it was mid-July. I noticed the shadows had stretched further than they should have, almost doubled in length. My compass needle hadn't stopped spinning since morning. I hiked a short loop westward, marking the route with red tape so I could find my way back. The terrain folded into narrow gullies where the granite pinched the sky into ribbons. I stopped once to rest, setting the camera on a rock. Through the viewfinder, I saw something pale move behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. But the playback caught it again. A figure between two pines just for an instant before vanishing. That's when I stopped filming instructionals. The project shifted from survival documentation to pure recording. I needed proof. By the time I returned to camp, the light had dimmed prematurely. It was barely 5 p.m., but the shadows pooled heavy across the basin. My GPS watch read fine on the screen but refused to log coordinates. It kept flashing. No signal. I built a larger fire, double the usual size, more for comfort than warmth. I set all 3 cameras, 2 official, 1 trail, around the perimeter, overlapping their fields of view. I even added my drone on standby mode, its front light blinking faintly red in the dark. When the sun dropped behind the ridge, the silence deepened again. The forest didn't transition gently. It just switched off. 1 second there was the trickle of the creek. The next there was nothing but the crackle of flame. I started speaking to the camera again, voice unsteady. This is Elise Moran, Granite Hollow. Time 6:42 p.m. Unusual environmental conditions persist. Multiple unverified sightings near camp perimeter. Equipment interference continues. I'm maintaining camp until sunrise unless further threat observed. Then I heard it. The same mechanical click as before, only this time from just beyond the firelight. I swung the camera toward the sound, zooming past the cedar line. The lens caught movement, a brief shimmer like heat distortion, and then the suggestion of a person. Too tall, limbs too long, standing motionless at the tree line. I steadied the camera, whispering to myself, "Don't blink. Keep rolling." The figure tilted its head, slow as ice shifting. For a moment, its outline blurred. transparent like it was both there and not. I felt the air tighten around me, the kind of stillness before a storm. The fire popped, and when I looked again, the shape was gone. I checked the live feed on my monitor. The image was distorted, static, lacing the screen. Then something moved through the pixels, a flicker of white crossing behind me. I spun around, raising my flashlight. Empty air. The rest of the night pressed down, thick with static energy. Every few minutes I'd catch the faint rhythm of footsteps circling the camp. Always just outside the light's edge. Ever closer, I recorded everything. My own voice narrating through gritted teeth, describing patterns of sound and movement. 4 steps, pause, 4 steps. Reverse direction. It went on like that for what felt like hours. My camera batteries drained faster than usual. One dead, then the next. The trail cam's light went dark entirely. At one point, I caught a faint voice on the edge of the audio. I replayed it twice before I could make out the words. A whisper, male, close to the microphone. Turn it off. That's when I realized the voice wasn't coming from behind the camera. It was inside the feed. An imprint. I killed the monitors, shut down the equipment, sat by the fire clutching the recorder in my lap. The flame hissed each time the wind shifted, but no breeze reached my face. Then something strange happened. Stranger than the rest. The cameras, all powered down, started blinking again. One by one, the indicator lights flared red in the dark. Recording lights active, though no batteries were inside. I backed away, every instinct screaming that I should leave, but my legs refused. The closest camera, the one I'd left aimed at the creek, slowly turned. Its motor whined, panning on its own toward me. My hands shook so hard I dropped the recorder. I could hear it still picking up my breath, sharp and fast. The red lights pulsed faster now, in rhythm as if synced. I forced myself toward the nearest one, meaning to pull the SD card. But the second I touched it, the light cut off, plunging the whole camp into dark. For a moment, nothing moved. Then from somewhere up the ridge, a bright flash lit the trees like a camera flash or lightning, though the sky was clear. The echo rolled through the hollow, deep and hollow. I waited. Nothing else. My watch read 7:03 p.m. It felt later. I packed my essentials, leaving most of the gear behind. The plan was simple. Hike to higher ground, re-establish signal, call dispatch, and abort. I'd come out here to study fear scientifically. Now I was just trying to survive it. As I started climbing, I looked back once at camp. The fire was dying, just embers now. But standing beside it, just visible in the last flicker, was a shape. It didn't move, didn't fade. It simply stayed there, upright, watching. I turned and kept climbing, refusing to look again. The climb out of the basin was harder than it should have been. My headlamp threw narrow cones of light across the granite, catching flecks of mica that looked like eyes when I moved too fast. My breath fogged the lens of my camera, but I kept filming anyway. I wanted proof of what was happening. Even if the footage came out garbled later, the trail wasn't visible anymore, not that there had ever been a proper one. But the landmarks I'd logged on the way in were gone. The twin cedars near the split ridge? Not there. The boulder I'd marked with red tape? Vanished or hidden. Every direction felt identical. Smooth gray stone and dark ridges swallowing sound. I stopped to check my GPS again. Still flashing no signal. My radio hissed faintly, catching some faraway frequency that rose and fell like breathing. "Base, this is Moran," I whispered, pressing the transmit key. "If anyone copies, I need coordinates confirmation. I'm leaving Granite Hollow, attempting North Ridge ascent." Static answered. Then, buried in the noise, my own voice came back. Leaving Granite Hollow, attempting North Ridge. I froze, thumb still on the switch. My voice looped once more, quieter this time, then cut off entirely. When you spend years in isolation out here, you learn to measure panic. It builds like altitude sickness, starts in the gut, rises slow. I forced myself to keep moving. One step, one breath, one heartbeat. The ridge path narrowed, forcing me to balance along slick rock ledges. Every few seconds I turned to sweep my light behind me. Nothing there, just the white cone fading into trees. But the feeling persisted. that slow, deliberate pressure of being observed. After maybe 20 minutes, I found something new, a small cairn, 5 stones stacked neatly on a slab. It hadn't been there before. I filmed it from multiple angles, narrating through clenched teeth. Unidentified marker, recent construction, located approximately 100 meters above camp. Then I saw what was wedged beneath the top stone. A fragment of tape, red torn cleanly down the middle. My tape, the breath left my body. Someone or something had moved ahead of me using my markers to build a trail of their own. I backed away, scanning the darkness. My light barely reached the next ridge, but in that thin distance I thought I saw motion. Something low, then tall again, as if a person had crawled and stood in one continuous movement. I blinked. Gone. My camera battery died at that moment, the lens retracting with a soft mechanical sigh. I didn't bother changing it. I just kept climbing. It felt endless. Granite under my boots, sky thinning above, the night refusing to age. I couldn't tell if hours had passed or none at all. The air was colder now, dry enough that each breath stung. Somewhere behind me, rock shifted. A single clatter, unmistakable. I swung around, light trembling in my hand. "Who's there?" I called. No answer. I took a slow step backward, then another. The silence closed again like a lid. When I turned to climb higher, a second sound came, closer. Not rock this time. A voice whispering. I couldn't catch words, only the cadence, fast, overlapping, like 2 voices layered. I started running. My boots slipped on smooth stone, scraping sparks as I scrambled upward. I didn't look back until I reached the next rise. The basin below glowed faintly in the moonlight. My campfire had burned out, but the tarp was visible, shifted, collapsed. And near the creek, reflecting silver against the water, was movement. Someone was walking there. Slow. Following the same circle where I'd filmed earlier. I turned off my light. The darkness was absolute. I crouched, breathing through my sleeve, forcing quiet into my body. My heartbeat was so loud it felt like a signal. After a long minute, the whispering stopped. The forest seemed to breathe again. A faint breeze rose, carrying the scent of smoke. Not from my fire, but fresher, sharper, like burning wire. I switched my radio back on. "Base, this is Moran," I whispered again. "If you copy, I'm..." This time the static shifted mid-sentence. A single voice cut through, flat and calm. "You're still in the hollow." Then silence. I nearly dropped the unit. I tried again, same result, dead air. I didn't recognize the voice. Female, maybe. Could have been a recording, an echo, anything. I packed the radio away and forced myself to keep moving. The ridge above was marked by a narrow split in the rock. I remembered passing it earlier that morning. It led to an open plateau where I'd planned to launch my drone. If I could reach that point, I might get line of sight with my truck's beacon. The path wound tighter, granite walls pressing closer. My light kept catching on quartz seams, bright white veins glowing under the beam. Then the quartz started to flicker, tiny flashes of reflection moving out of sync with my hand. I realized slowly that the flashes weren't reflections. They were lights. 1, 2, then 4, 5. Blinking faintly in the darkness ahead, scattered across the rock face like eyes opening. I stepped closer, heart hammering. They weren't eyes, not exactly. They were camera LEDs, my cameras. All 3, mounted along the ridge. But I hadn't brought them up here. The sight knocked the breath out of me. Each one faced downward, lenses fixed on the basin below. The red lights pulsed in rhythm, recording. My own field monitor, left at camp, must have been transmitting the signal, somehow active without power. And then one of the cameras turned. The motor whined softly, lens pivoting until it pointed directly at me. I stumbled backward, almost lost footing on the slope. The light blinked faster. A low hum filled the air. Not mechanical, more like vibration through the stone. My radio burst alive again, that same female voice whispering a single phrase, "Don't climb out." The sound cut, leaving me in a ringing silence. I looked down at the cameras. each one angled slightly now, not all toward me, but toward something between us. A shadow moved across the granite. Thin, tall, unbroken by terrain, I caught only the edges of its shape before it vanished against the rock. I bolted upward, adrenaline overriding reason. My legs burned, lungs scraping cold air. I reached the plateau and fell to my knees. For a second, I believed I'd escaped the hollow. The stars were sharp above me, far too close. My GPS finally lit green. Signal acquired. Relief surged through me, then froze. The coordinates displayed weren't anywhere near El Dorado National Forest. They weren't anywhere in California. The screen read, lat 0,000 Rs, lon 0,000 Rs. I turned slowly, scanning the ridge. The forest below seemed flatter than before, less three-dimensional. Like a photograph under glass. Even sound felt wrong, muted, delayed. I tried the radio again, voice shaking. Base, this is Moran. Confirm location, signal reads 0. Repeat 0. Please respond. Nothing. Then the static deepened, thickened, until it became a low rumble. I felt it through my boots, through the ground. The granite vibrated like something alive underneath it. A light blinked to my left, another red camera LED. Then another, closer. They weren't mine. They lined the ridge now, dozens of them, stretching out in both directions, flickering like a heartbeat, and below, down in the basin. I saw movement again, multiple figures now, walking in a slow circle around the campfire remains. Their outlines pulsed faintly as if the air around them was wrong. I counted 4, then 6. Then I stopped counting. I didn't film this part. I couldn't. The last thing I remember before I ran was the faint sound of shutters clicking, all at once echoing up through the hollow like applause. I don't remember deciding to run. 1 second I was standing on the ridge. The next my body was already moving, crashing through brush that hadn't been there when I climbed up. The camera's red lights pulsed in my peripheral vision like hazard beacons, each flash freezing me mid-stride in brief stuttering frames. The ground itself seemed to lurch beneath my boots, slopes bending where they shouldn't, the air thickening until breathing felt like pushing through water. Every instinct told me to get down the ridge, out of the basin, anywhere but here. I aimed for the faint glint of the creek below, using it like a lifeline. The flashlight beam swung wild, slicing through trees that blurred into motion. Somewhere behind me, the low hum I'd heard earlier rose again, no longer mechanical but layered, like voices breathing in unison. My radio sputtered to life mid-stride. Elise, it whispered. Not my last name, not Moran, just Elise the way my brother used to say it. I skidded to a stop, pulse hammering. Who is this? The static answered with a soft exhale, then the same voice again. Slower this time. You're walking the wrong way. The words felt heavy, as if spoken right behind my ear. I ripped the headset off and kept running. By the time I reached the basin floor, the fire's glow had vanished completely. Only embers glowed faintly in the ash. My camp looked dismantled. Tarp collapsed, food bag open, gear spread in a half circle like someone had been cataloging it. The air smelled like whetstone and ozone, the kind of scent that comes right before lightning, though the sky above was still clear. I crouched to grab my field monitor. It was warm, humming faintly, though its battery pack lay several feet away. The screen flickered to life before I could even touch the button. A live feed filled it. My own face, grainy and pale, staring directly into the camera from somewhere else. The me on the screen spoke. No sound, just lips moving. I turned a slow circle, scanning the trees. Nothing but dark. The feed continued. My silent, double-mouthing words I couldn't hear. Then the picture jittered and cut to black. Something snapped nearby. Dry wood breaking under weight. I swung the light toward the creek. The beam hit water first, then the shape kneeling beside it. At first it looked human. Shoulders, head, arms bent at the knee, but its reflection in the creek didn't match. The figure's outline rippled wrong, delayed, like the water itself was trying to catch up. I stepped back. The movement made it turn. It didn't stand. It unfolded. I ran. Branches tore at my jacket as I pushed through the undergrowth toward the north end of the basin. The terrain tilted, funneling into a narrow ravine I hadn't seen before. Granite walls closed on both sides, leaving just enough room for the creek to slip through. My light hit slick moss, veins of quartz glowing faintly under the beam. The sound of water dulled as I moved deeper in. Each step echoed seconds late, as if the ravine replayed sound after I'd already made it. I killed the light for a moment, testing the dark. The air itself shimmered faintly, gray and luminous like dust suspended in water. I thought I saw motion through it, tall shapes pacing parallel to me just beyond the stone. That's when I realized the ravine wasn't narrowing. I was. The walls stayed fixed, but perspective folded inward, compressing until the space ahead looked impossibly far. The kind of optical illusion you get when heat distorts air, except it didn't fade when I blinked. I forced my eyes down to my compass. The needle had stopped spinning. It was perfectly still, pointing straight ahead, north. Relief flashed through me for half a heartbeat before I looked closer. The compass face wasn't moving, but my reflection inside it was. A pale outline of my face, mouth opening, eyes wrong. I dropped it. The metal hit rock and clattered downstream. The sound kept going long after it should have stopped. My only thought was escape. I climbed the left wall, scraping palms against granite until blood slicked my grip. When I hauled myself over the top, the forest opened again, but not the same forest. The basin lay below, but in this version the creek was gone. In its place, a long dark scar carved through the granite, smooth as glass. My camp sat intact again. Every item precisely where I'd left it that morning, as if time had reset. Smoke rose from the fire pit, thin, blue, steady. I blinked. The smoke vanished. I stayed low, trying to orient myself, but every direction led to more of the same. The pines repeated. Same bent trunk, same knot of exposed roots. I started marking them with my knife, shallow slashes in the bark. When I circled back less than 10 minutes later, the marks were gone, replaced by new growth, wet and fresh. The cameras clicked on again. I didn't see the lights this time, I heard them. Soft mechanical whirring, shutters resetting, lenses adjusting. Then the faint buzz of my drone activating somewhere above the canopy. The hum deepened into a single note. It came from all directions at once, vibrating through my ribs, my teeth. I dropped to my knees, pressing my hands against the ground. The granite was trembling, not shaking, breathing, then everything stopped. For a few seconds there was absolute silence. Not just quiet, but absence, the kind of void where even your own heartbeat feels muted. Then a new sound rose, faint and rhythmic. Footsteps. Not from behind me, not from the sides. From underneath. They moved through the stone like something walking just beneath the surface, pacing a slow circle around where I knelt. I could feel the pressure of each step rise through my hands, through the rock. "Stop," I said out loud, voice cracking. "Please stop." The steps did. Then the ground under me gave a single deep pulse, like the hollow exhale of some massive lung. And from that pulse came a whisper, faint but clear enough to understand. "Stay here." I staggered back, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. I should have run again, but my legs refused. The whisper wasn't just in the air, it was in the granite, vibrating through every surface around me. The field monitor in my pack came alive again, screen flashing through static. I yanked it free. The image that filled it wasn't the forest or my camp. It was me viewed from above, kneeling on the same slab of stone I stood on now. But behind that version of me stood something tall and pale, hand almost touching my shoulder. I turned. The space behind me was empty, only air and open rock. When I looked back at the screen, the thing's hand had moved closer. Inches from contact, my reflection turned its head slowly toward the camera, as if it knew I was watching. The feed cut. That broke whatever paralysis had held me. I ran blind, crashing through brush until the granite opened again into the wide plain at the base of the ridge. My lungs burned, legs shaking. I didn't know what direction I faced anymore. The stars above had shifted, their constellations bent and unfamiliar. I stumbled until my knees hit stone, gasping. For the first time, I said it out loud, whispering into the empty forest, "I think I'm lost." Something in the dark whispered back, my own voice, perfect in tone and cadence. "I know." For a while, I didn't move. My own voice, coming from somewhere I couldn't see, hung in the air like fog that refused to disperse. The trees loomed in silhouettes, black veins etched against a sky that didn't look right anymore. Too many stars, too sharp. The kind of sky you see at high altitude, not here. I shone my light toward the sound. The beam cut through branches and died against granite 20 feet away. Nothing there. No echo, no second breath following mine. Yet I could still feel the presence, the kind of electric stillness that hums inside your chest before thunder breaks. I forced my hand to reach for the camera again. It powered on without the switch moving. The screen lit my face in pale blue. "This is Elise Moran," I whispered, voice trembling. "Time unknown. I'm still inside Granite Hollow. I believe something's mimicking me." The sound of my voice felt strange, delayed as if the air replayed it a half-second later. The forest shifted when I started walking again. Not visibly, but I could sense it. A slow rotation of landmarks, like the world around me had turned half a degree while I wasn't looking. Every direction led downhill, but no two slopes met. I followed what looked like a dried stream bed, hoping it would guide me out. After a few minutes, I saw light again. Not moonlight, warmer, steadier like fire. Relief surged, but I kept my pace careful, low. When I reached the edge of the clearing, the fire's shape resolved. A small campfire identical to mine, burning in the middle of an empty space. My tarp, my pack, my gear arranged exactly as before. Only one difference, someone was sitting by the fire. The figure was turned slightly away, back bent, head down as if watching the flames. Their clothes were mine, the same jacket, same hat, same torn left knee. I could even see the small reflective patch I'd sewn onto the shoulder for night filming. I stepped forward, every nerve alive. "Hey," I said softly, "who's there?" The figure didn't turn. The fire crackled once, loud in the stillness. I circled slowly, flashlight raised, until I could see their profile. It was my face. Not reflection, real, dimensional breathing. She sat cross-legged, staring into the fire with a calm expression I didn't recognize. The air around her shimmered faintly, bending the light. I couldn't speak. The copy blinked once, and that tiny movement broke whatever trance I'd been under. I stumbled backward, tripping on a root, landing hard on the granite. The other me finally looked up. Her lips moved, and the sound came not from her mouth, but from every direction at once. "You should have stayed," she said. The fire dimmed instantly, shrinking to a handful of coals. The shape collapsed with it like she'd been made of the same flame. I ran again. There was no plan now, no logic, just the raw need to get away. The forest bent inward, trees merging at the crowns. My light flickered each time I turned. Once, when it went dark completely, I saw faint phosphorescent shapes moving between trunks. Arms too long, torsos tapering into nothing. The sound they made was soft, almost tender, like breathing into cloth. I kept running until my legs refused. When I fell, it wasn't to the ground, but into a shallow depression of stone. My palms hit smooth rock, cold enough to sting. When I lifted the flashlight, I realized I'd found another basin, a smaller one, circular, maybe 20 feet across. In its center lay a pool of still water so clear it mirrored the sky above. I leaned closer. My reflection rippled from the light, fractured and reformed, but it wasn't following my movement. When I tilted my head left, the reflection tilted right. When I blinked, it didn't, then it smiled. I stumbled back, light shaking wildly over the stone. My reflection didn't vanish. It kept smiling, wider now, teeth too sharp in the half-light. The water began to tremble, though no wind touched it. The vibration deepened into that same low hum I'd felt earlier, reverberating through the rock under my boots. "Stop it," I whispered, though I didn't know what I was addressing. The reflection only widened its grin. Then its mouth moved again and my voice, calm, measured, spoke from the surface. "You're almost there." Before I could react, the reflection's hand lifted. The water surface bulged upward, fingers made of liquid reaching toward the air. I turned and bolted up the ridge again, nearly blind, half sobbing. The hum followed me, growing louder, and for one awful moment I thought the ground would open. But instead of collapsing, the granite flattened. It smoothed. The forest thinned until the trees were silhouettes painted on stone. Ahead of me, a faint white glow pulsed rhythmically like a beacon. I ran toward it, clutching the flashlight, though its beam barely pierced the fog forming around my face. When I reached the glow, I found the source. My drone. It hovered 5 feet above the ground, lights blinking in perfect sync. I hadn't activated it. The controller was still packed away, yet it hung there completely still, camera gimbal rotating slowly until the lens locked on me. The hum fell silent. Then the drone's speaker crackled to life. My own recorded voice played back, distorted. 3 days in, my cameras started switching on by themselves. That was the line from my introduction, the one I'd filmed at the start of the trip. Playback showed someone walking just behind me. I took a step back. The drone matched it, maintaining distance. Its rotors barely whispered. I could feel air moving against my face. Then the camera tilted downward and began to rise as if inviting me to follow. I didn't. I threw a rock instead. It passed straight through. The drone shimmered and vanished like heat haze. The air filled with the faint sound of shutters again. Hundreds of them, distant but closing in. I turned in a full circle. The ridgeline behind me glittered with red LEDs, one by one blinking awake. The same camera lights from before, now stretching in an unbroken chain around the basin. For a moment I thought I heard whispering from within the forest again. Multiple voices, all mine, murmuring different phrases, different tones. Snippets of my own past recordings. Maintain composure. Granite Hollow, day 1. No signs of panic, just silence. Then over all of it came the clearest one yet. You can't film what you've already become. The lights blinked faster. My camera, still slung against my chest, powered on without my hand touching it. The screen filled with a live feed of the ridge. The view zoomed in automatically until the image sharpened. There, standing among the trees, was a person with my same posture, same camera, same flashlight beam pointed straight at me. The feed split in two, like a mirror shattering. Both versions of me turned to the side at the exact same moment. I shut the camera off and ran, half blind with panic. I didn't know which direction was out anymore. The forest kept folding, replaying itself. My breath came in short bursts, the same phrase repeating in my head. It's still the same day, it's still the same day. When I tripped, I landed hard on gravel. Not granite, gravel. The sound of it was sharp, real, different. For the first time, I could smell soil instead of stone. I blinked against the sudden dawn light. A faint gray horizon had appeared beyond the trees. But when I turned to look back down into the basin, the light was gone again. Total dark. And in that dark, something stood at the edge, watching. For a few precious seconds, I thought the light meant morning, that the endless night had finally broken. The gray along the horizon shimmered like dawn through fog, soft and clean. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. The light didn't spread. It just hung there, flat and unmoving like a projection against the trees. I stood perfectly still, afraid that any movement might make it fade. The air smelled different here. Wet soil, not granite dust. I crouched and let my fingers dig into the dirt. Cold, damp, real. I wanted to believe that meant I was out, that the basin was behind me. But the silence hadn't changed. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just that thin hum under everything, so low it made the fillings in my teeth buzz. I turned slowly toward the ridge. The darkness below was complete, an ink spill that swallowed everything. Trees, rocks, the creek, even the faint glow of my old fire. But in the center of that void, something gleamed. A tiny red light. Then another. Then a dozen, the cameras again, watching. I backed away, eyes on the false dawn. If I could reach it, maybe I'd find the real forest beyond. The terrain was flatter here, shifting from rock to mud. My boots left deep prints that filled instantly with black water. It wasn't raining. The moisture came from the ground itself, pulsing like it was breathing. Halfway through the clearing, my radio chirped, one short burst like a heartbeat. I froze, pulled it from my belt. The display blinked incoming transmission. "Base, this is Moran," I said, voice catching. "Do you read me?" Static answered. Then faintly a woman's voice. "Elise, stop moving." The sound wasn't distorted this time. It was clear, close, like she was standing just behind the mic. I spun, scanning the trees. "Identify yourself," I said. "How do you know my name?" Silence. Then the voice again, same tone but softer. Look down, I did. My own boot prints had vanished. The mud was perfectly smooth, undisturbed, yet water still rippled outward from where I stood, as if something invisible had stepped into the earth beneath me. I lifted one foot slowly, shaking. The ground exhaled, a low hollow sound like air leaving lungs. That was enough. I ran for the light. The world around me blurred with motion, trees bending away like reeds. The false dawn grew brighter until it was all I could see. I burst through the last row of trunks and stumbled into open space. It wasn't morning. It was a clearing filled with fog so white it looked solid. The light didn't come from the sky but from the ground itself, seeping upward in a pale glow. My shadow stretched thin and wrong across it. When I turned in a circle, I realized the fog wall wasn't random. It curved perfectly, enclosing me in a ring. Something flickered at the edge of that wall. Movement. A human shape pressing against the fog, trying to get through. Then another beside it. And another dozens. They weren't moving toward me exactly, just pacing, circling. Every now and then, one leaned close enough that the face almost cleared the mist. I recognized them. Each one. They were all me. Different angles, different expressions, different frames in the same reel. Faces caught mid-breath, eyes half blinked, some smiling, some blank. Each version of me held a camera, lenses trained inward toward the center, toward me. I wanted to scream, but couldn't. My throat refused to open. I could only watch as one of the figures pressed both palms against the fog from the other side. The membrane stretched inward, trembling until the handprints appeared clear as glass. Then I heard my own voice again from somewhere high above. Recording. Day 3, Granite Hollow. The fog rippled and every figure spoke at once, overlapping in perfect unison. Stay where the signal holds. The words hit the air like a physical impact. My knees buckled. The cameras along the ridge blinked alive again. Hundreds of tiny red dots shining through the mist, surrounding the clearing like a constellation. The hum deepened and the ground under me began to pulse. I stumbled backward, nearly losing the flashlight. The beam sliced through fog, catching glints of movement, hands, shoulders, silhouettes pressing inward. They weren't trying to escape the fog. They were re-entering it. Each shape dissolved as it passed through the light, leaving faint trails that curled like smoke. One of them, one of me, paused just before vanishing. Her mouth moved, and I could finally make out the words, "We keep coming back." That broke me. I turned and ran into the fog itself, straight toward where the light was brightest. My body expected resistance, but there was none. I went through like falling into cold water. The world flipped. For a heartbeat, I saw everything, every camera, every copy, every frame looping back into itself. A map of repetition, then gravity reasserted itself, and I hit solid ground hard enough to knock the air from my chest. When I looked up, I was back at the creek. My camp stood exactly as it had that first afternoon. Tarp pitched, firewood stacked neatly, food bag sealed. The sun hung overhead, late morning light clear and gold. Birds chirped. Wind stirred the trees. It was all normal again. I sat there for a long time, shaking, waiting for something to move wrong. Nothing did. My watch read 10:42 a.m. The same time I'd logged at the start of day 1, I tested the radio. It buzzed normally. "Base, this is Moran," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I'm calling early in to expedition. Equipment malfunction. Returning to Trailhead," the reply came instantly, a man's voice this time. "Copy that, Moran. You're cleared to head out. We've got your beacon on screen now, Beacon." My beacon had been dead since yesterday, or whatever yesterday was. But I didn't argue. I packed fast, tearing the camp down in record time. When I slung the pack over my shoulders, one of the cameras powered on by itself. The playback screen showed footage from earlier, me standing in the fog ring, surrounded by copies. My stomach turned. I tried to shut it off, but the buttons didn't respond. The image zoomed slowly until the lens filled with my own face. The me on screen smiled faintly. Then the camera spoke, my voice again. "You made it out." The screen cut to black. I left it running. I didn't touch another piece of gear, didn't check a single file. I started walking east toward the ridge, refusing to look behind me. Every few minutes I'd hear faint clicks, the sound of shutters snapping from somewhere deep in the trees. But I never stopped. As I climbed, sunlight filtered through the canopy in warm patches. Real sunlight. My shadow stayed steady for once. The forest even smelled alive again. Sap, earth, pine resin. By the time I reached the top, my knees gave out. The world below looked exactly as it should. Valleys rolling, blue haze on the horizon, a hawk circling an open sky. The hollow behind me lay silent and gray. I told myself it was over. Then from the ridge far across the basin, a faint flicker caught my eye. A camera light blinking red, only one. And standing beside it, barely visible against the stone, was a figure in a gray jacket, camera strap across the chest. Me. At first I thought the light was a trick of the sun, just glare bouncing off quartz. But it blinked again, steady and mechanical. I lifted my binoculars with trembling hands. The distance wasn't far. Maybe half a mile across the basin. The red LED pulsed like a heartbeat. Then I saw her. She was standing exactly where I'd been hours ago. Or whatever passed for hours in this place. Same jacket, same boots, even the same loose hair I'd shoved behind one ear that morning. The camera strap crossed her chest at the same angle. The sunlight hit her face just long enough for me to see the faint scar above her eyebrow. My scar. She was me. Not a mirror, not a reflection. The posture was too real. The way her weight leaned slightly on the left hip like I always do when my knee aches. She stood still, facing me across the distance. Between us lay the hollow, empty and gleaming like a dry lake bed. I lowered the binoculars. The red light kept blinking, though she didn't move. I should have left right then. I should have turned east, followed the ridge out, and never looked back. But I couldn't. Curiosity is a disease when you've spent years chasing stories in places no one else goes. You start needing to see how it ends, even when you know you won't like it. So I went back down. The descent felt longer than it should have. The air cooled again, the light dimming into that washed-out gray. When I glanced over my shoulder, the sun was gone, though I hadn't seen it set. My watch still read 10:42 a.m. Halfway down, the trees thinned, replaced by those same smooth shelves of granite. My boots scraped against the stone, echoing too loud. I called out once, "Hello?" just to hear my voice bounce back. It didn't. The sound hit the air and died. When I reached the basin floor, the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The light from across the hollow looked closer now, brighter. The figure hadn't moved. Her camera still blinked red, steady as breath. I stepped onto the smooth rock where my old camp had been. Nothing remained, not the tarp, not the ash, not even footprints. The surface was polished like glass, reflecting the faint red light. As I walked, my reflection appeared beside me, two Elises moving across the stone. At first it mirrored me perfectly, then it didn't. When I stopped, it kept walking. I turned away from it, fixing my eyes on the light ahead. Step after step, my reflection followed in the periphery, a half second behind. The hum returned, deep this time, coming from beneath the rock. When I was close enough to see her face again, I stopped. She hadn't moved at all. Just stood there, camera raised, lens pointed straight at me. "Who are you?" I called out. She lowered the camera. The LED blinked faster. Then she raised her free hand and pointed to something behind me. I spun. The hollow wasn't empty anymore. A dozen figures stood across the basin rim, evenly spaced, each one holding a camera. Red lights flickered on every ridge and slope. The air vibrated with faint mechanical whirring, shutters sinking like a slow pulse. I turned back to the figure ahead. She was closer now, though I hadn't seen her move. 20 feet 10. The light from her camera painted my chest in a dull red glow. "What do you want?" I shouted. Her answer came from the radio on my shoulder, not her mouth. My own voice, flat and calm. "To finish the story." Then her camera clicked. The sound was small, but the effect immediate. The air flexed, bending light around her. The rock beneath my feet rippled like liquid. I tried to back away, but my boots stuck fast as if the ground itself had softened. "Stop!" I yelled. "I'm leaving!" The radio crackled again. My voice repeated, "You already did." The world flickered. The ridge behind her vanished, replaced by black void, then reappeared. Each flicker shorter than the last, like frames skipping in an old film reel. My heart slammed against my ribs. I tore at my bootlaces, dragging one foot free, stumbled onto my hands and crawled backward. She followed. Not walking, just appearing closer each time the world blinked. I could see her eyes now. They weren't mine. Too dark, too steady. When she was only a few feet away, her camera lifted again. The LED turned white this time. A soft click, then a blinding flash. I covered my face, falling sideways. The flash burned through my eyelids, leaving a perfect red circle in my vision. When it faded, the basin was empty again. No lights. No copies, no sound. I sat up slowly, shaking. The camera I'd dropped earlier lay beside me. Its power light glowed faintly green. Against every better instinct, I turned it on. The screen showed fresh footage. Time-stamped just minutes ago. It was me. Standing frozen in the same spot. Eyes closed, a white glow outlining my body. The image trembled, then glitched. 2 frames overlapping as if I'd stepped halfway out of myself. The file ended with a single still frame. My silhouette fading into the granite. I didn't delete it. I couldn't. I ran until the basin fell behind me again, scrambling up the north slope on hands and knees. My breath tore raw in my throat. The hum faded as I climbed, replaced by wind, the first real wind I'd felt in what might have been days. When I reached the ridge, I collapsed and lay there, face to the dirt, until the shaking stopped. The forest looked normal again. Real. Imperfect. The light no longer glowed from the ground, but filtered through clouds. My compass needle pointed steady east. For the first time, I thought maybe I'd done it, broken free of the hollow's loop. I stood, testing my balance. The radio was dead, the screen black. My camera battery light blinked once, weak, then died too. I didn't care. I slung the strap over my neck and started walking east toward the forest edge where the trees thinned to open road. After maybe an hour, I saw it. My truck, parked exactly where I'd left it. The same layer of dust, the same map folded on the dash. My pack hit the dirt as I sprinted the last stretch. I threw open the driver's side door and collapsed inside, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. I turned the key. The engine caught instantly. For the first time since entering Granite Hollow, I cried. Relief hit like a flood. I pressed my forehead against the wheel and just breathed, the sound of the motor grounding me in the real world again. When I finally looked up, I noticed the passenger seat. A camera sat there. One I didn't own. Its lens faced me. The red recording light blinked once. Then I heard my own voice from the back seat whispering close to my ear. Smile. I didn't look right away. I couldn't. My fingers locked on the steering wheel, the engine idling steady as a heartbeat. The voice, my voice, still hung in the air behind me, soft as breath. Smile. For a second, I told myself it was an echo from the camera, a leftover recording. But the voice had direction. It came from the space inches behind my shoulder, close enough that I felt warmth move against my hair. I forced myself to look into the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but the reflection wasn't. A figure sat there in the mirror's frame, head tilted just slightly, eyes fixed on mine. She looked exhausted, skin pale, dark smudges under both eyes. Me again. Only this version didn't move when I did. Her expression stayed blank while mine trembled. The red light on the camera beside me blinked faster. I turned toward it, nothing on the passenger seat now. Just indentations in the fabric, as if something heavy had been resting there a moment before. The reflection smiled again. My chest went cold. I opened the door and stumbled out into the air. The forest was utterly still, but the sky above shimmered wrong, the color of dawn seen through water. My truck's engine still rumbled behind me, but the sound seemed to fade the further I stepped away. I stood there, arms shaking, whispering to myself, "It's real. The truck is real. You're out." Then I heard the door slam shut on its own. The locks clicked. The headlights flashed once and went dark. The forest swallowed the sound. I circled around to the driver's side, pulling the handle. Locked. I cupped my hands against the glass and looked inside. The driver's seat was occupied. She sat there, both hands on the wheel, face half turned toward me. My reflection, my body, whatever it was smiling. The red camera light glowed faintly on the dash. I stumbled backward until my spine hit a tree. The air around me thickened again with that low, steady hum, the same one from the hollow. The forest blurred at the edges, trees stretching taller, bending inward. The headlights of the truck flickered back on. The me behind the wheel lifted one hand in a slow wave. I ran. Branches whipped my arms as I plunged back into the trees. The light behind me faded, replaced by the same flat gray that had haunted me all night. I didn't know where I was going anymore, north, east, it didn't matter. The hum followed, louder now, layered with faint whispers. Each voice was my own. Different tones, different recordings. Granite Hollow, day 1. No signs of panic. Stay where the signal holds. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the words didn't stop. They came from inside my skull, looping and folding over each other until language itself lost shape. I tripped and fell hard, gravel scraping my palms. The earth underneath pulsed once, deep, slow, like a heartbeat. I looked up. The ridge loomed ahead, the same curve of granite where I'd first seen the basin. And standing on it were the figures again. Dozens this time. All of them me. Each held a camera, each lens trained directly down at me. The red lights blinked in a rhythm that matched my breathing. I screamed. The sound barely left my throat before dissolving into static. Then all at once, every camera shutter clicked. The light that followed wasn't bright. It was soft, colorless, the kind that erases shadow. My body froze mid-step. I could feel something sliding over my skin like air turning to glass. The hum deepened, becoming almost musical. The world folded in on itself again. Sky, ridge, forest, all pulled toward a single vanishing point where the cameras converged. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the basin. Morning light spilled across the granite. My camp was gone, but my gear lay scattered exactly as it had been before the first night. My camera rested beside me, recording light on. I lifted it slowly, hands trembling. The lens faced the creek. A figure stood there, head bowed, hands washing something in the water. I zoomed in. The face that looked up was mine. She smiled faintly and said, "We start here." The feed froze. I checked the time code, 06:12 a.m., day 1. My stomach hollowed out. The trees around me were alive with birds again. Sunlight flickered through branches. The air smelled like dew. Everything was exactly as it had been the morning I arrived. The trip hadn't ended. It had restarted. My hand shook as I lifted the radio. "Base, this is Moran," I said, voice hoarse. "Beginning documentation for Granite Hollow Expedition Day 1. Weather clear. Coordinates logged. No static this time. The reply came clean, professional like always. Copy that, Moran. Good to have you back on. I froze. The voice wasn't the dispatcher I knew. It was mine. The line stayed open, faint breathing coming through. Then, make sure to film everything. The channel clicked dead. I looked down at my gear. Every battery fully charged. SD cards empty. Compass reset to north. No trace of ash, no footprints, no blood. Just pristine wilderness waiting. Somewhere in the distance, the faint buzz of a drone rose. I tilted my head up. A small black shape hovered against the sun, light glinting off its lens. It was already filming. I wanted to scream, but exhaustion won. The hollow didn't want fear, it wanted repetition. That's why everything was still. That's why I was still here. I walked back toward the clearing, my own voice already narrating inside my head. My name is Elise Moran, and I film solo survival expeditions. The words came easily now, practiced perfect. I looked into the lens of my camera and hit record. The forest fell silent again. Behind me, somewhere deep inside the granite, another shutter clicked, and everything began exactly as it always had.